What's up, y'all? Happy Wednesday night. It's your host, Wes Tyler, for the Breaking Conservative, and I hope your week is going good. It's been a heck of a week for me. Been pretty stressful the past few days, to be honest, and I'll let y'all in on a little bit of personal life, how it happens for me. I was headed into work on Monday, and I was thinking it was going to be a normal week. I was a few minutes behind, but you know what? That happens to me pretty often. And I was driving on a highway down the street from my home, and I've got this truck where I've invested some money into it. I've got some all-terrain tires, feel pretty confident with them. They're still under warranty, only about a year old. And the tire on my passenger side in the back explodes while I'm going 60 miles an hour on the highway. And thank God all the traffic stopped, and I was able to pull over to the shoulder. Then I spent like 3 hours on the side of the road trying to get a tow on there and then a spare on it, and then now trying to get the wheel fixed, the tire fixed, all this stuff. I've got a picture here of what I went through, so I ended up sending this to my boss at work, and you can see there where the tire is just gone. And I'm sure there was like sparks and stuff flying up behind me, so it was a heck of a week. So it's still being fixed. Thank goodness the damage to the actual wheel wasn't too terrible, but it's definitely going to take some time. So I was able to get a rental. But that's pretty much how my week is going. And it's like sometimes you have these type of weeks where it feels like everything is against you. It feels like no matter what you do, things like this are going to happen. The tech over there the mechanic over at the car dealership was like, I don't even know how this happened. This is like a freak accident, man. Like your tires are good condition. This is crazy. And maybe you've had a week like that. Maybe in the past you've had one that you can recall where you have a week where it just feels like everyone and everything is just moving in slow motion, or people are not doing what they're supposed to do, or things are just breaking around you and it feels like there's no way to fix them. That's kind of the week that I've had. But I love being able to come here and talk to you and do this. It's therapeutic for me to be able to set time aside every week just to focus on conservatism and political philosophy, to talk about what's going on, to be able to read off your comments and your thoughts, to be able to focus on some other things besides the daily grind of life, because it seems like we get lost in that so much. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I do have some announcements here that we'll go through real quick, and the biggest one is that we are going to start opening up some new ways to support the channel once Easter happens and we've gotten through that. So we're gearing up for that at my house. Our church is going to have a whole lot going on, and it's going to be a lot of fun with Easter this year. I think as things open up, especially where I live in Florida, that's the case. We expect a lot of people coming back to church, which is fun because my wife works at a church. I have our kids all dressed up and everything. So it's really going to be a fun time. But once Easter's through, we're going to gear up with our channel with a couple new different things. We're doing a lot of work to be able to kind of branch out our different shows on this channel. We're working with some potential sponsors who are going to help our effort. We're going to try to launch it on some new platforms, probably going to end up joining Patreon, and we're looking for your help. If there's ways that you want to support the channel, you want to plug in, let us know. If you're willing to donate some funds for that, we will use it exclusively for the channel, things to upgrade the production equipment that we have, do some advertising, get our name out there. We really believe that our voice, not just mine, but the entire channel, everybody who contributes, and the conversations that we have are important. They're needed now more than ever. We need to get conservatives on track. We need to solidify what we believe, and we need to be able to respond to what's going on in the world right now, because there's so many things that are changing in our country and in our lives, and having a strong conservative voice is more important than ever. Those of you who've been following the channel know that we've been trying to gear up. We want to respond to efforts like the Young Turks, which have thousands, if not millions, of followers. We believe we can compete with them. But the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we have a similar production quality, if we have all of our stuff together to be able to go to war with those type of folks in the war of ideas. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to message me and I'll let you know how to do that. But we're going to have some new ways to do that here coming up pretty soon. So it looks like I got a couple comments here already. Megan says, going back to my tire. Here, I'll bring that back up. She says, yep, I understand, which I appreciate. Yep, it's been that kind of a week, Megan. So thanks for being here. And then CD Blue says, Holy crap, the tire is effed up. It's beyond that, brother. It's completely destroyed. Yeah. It was ripped up. I'm just glad that everybody's okay. But I took a picture of that and I sent it to my boss. I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna be late today. So it happens to all of us. It happens to all of us, man. And we just gotta fight through it and be able to get to what's good. So that's what we're gonna do today. So I'm gonna give you about 10 minutes on Russell Kirk. So that's going to be our show today is who was Russell Kirk? And maybe that name means nothing to you. Maybe it does mean something to you. You know, I'd certainly like to hear both ways. But you know, when I go through this channel, that I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of like historical facts or a lot of like anecdotal information. I'm going to tell you exactly who this person was and why it matters to your life right now. We can always get into what particular books that you should read, or what I recommend for you, what you should think in terms of how to defend this person. We can talk about the history and where this person lived. We can do that with Edmund Burke or Russell Kirk or any conservative, but none of that matters until I show you and discuss how this can affect your personal life today, how it helps you navigate weeks like what I'm having right now, right? That is where the ideas matter. That's where the people who generate them matter, because now you're saying, okay, I can apply this to my life. And that's what we're going to do with Russell Kirk, because he's one of the greatest conservative writers in America and really the world. There's very few people who have written more about conservatism than Russell Kirk. Very few people who can convey the ideas as clearly as he has. Having read several of his books, I can tell you that immediately when you start to write it, you feel very much like this person knows what they're talking about, and it's easy to read. He did an enormous amount of research over his life, and then he said, I want people to be able to catch up without having to do all of the homework that I've done. And so he breaks down all these authors like Marcus Aurelius or Edmund Burke or John Adams, all of these different guys. He breaks them down into very short paragraphs, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I actually get what this person stood for. So that to me makes him one of the greatest writers in history, especially one of the greatest conservative writers in history, and a lot of people agree. So that's why we're talking about him today. And so getting back to what I said in terms of how does this help you today, or how does this help you navigate political philosophy today, or discussions that you have with your friends, I'm going to give you, I'm sure there's way more, but I'm going to give you, in the interest of time, two major effects that Russell Kirk had on the conservative movement and that he can have today and for us right now if we listen to him. The first one is that he saved conservatism from a sense of self-righteousness. And I see this everywhere in the conservative movement today. We have a lot of smart people in the conservative movement, but it seems like every one that you listen to, every show that you dial into, you turn on any type of conservative news outlet, there is this sense of self-righteousness, not just anger at the left, not just a desire to save the country, but people are constantly naming shows after themselves. They're constantly saying, listen to me, trust me, I've got this figured out, I'm smarter than so-and-so, and I'm going to prove it with my rationality, with my logic, and that's how we're going to win. And that's good in terms of those people. That's great that you're smart, but we're not building a movement that stands the test of time, because if we ever lose any of those people, then we lose their ability to reason and their ability to use their cognition to make arguments. So how do we get to a point where conservatism is more than just these individuals who happen to be in front of a camera like me? How do we move beyond a sense of self-righteousness? Well, that's what Russell Kirk provided. So in the interest of time, again, I'll just highlight one book called The Conservative Mind, and you can see it says there from Burke to Eliot. And what Kirk did is he said, conservatism is more than just one person. It may be led by somebody today, and it may be led by somebody tomorrow, but I'm going to show you how all of these people have related ideas that are part of the same movement. Before Russell Kirk wrote The Conservative Mind, people didn't really think of conservatives or conservatism as this broader thing. They didn't see how people related to each other. It was more about the personalities, which I think is where we're at today. But when Kirk put it together, he said there is a mind, there is a way of thinking in which all of these people through history are related. So he starts with Edmund Burke, the person that we named our channel after, and he works all the way up to what was then the present day of T.S. Eliot and other writers who were recently active, and said, see how these ideas work together and bring all these people together. And once you see that, you start to realize that conservatism is more than just the individuals. It's actually this mind, it's actually this way of thinking that any person can have. We need that so desperately today, because right now, conservatism is so much about a couple individuals, whether that's Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or Ben Shapiro or whomever you happen to follow. Not saying those people are doing anything wrong. However, we need people who bring them together and show how conservatism is a coherent framework in which they're all together, as opposed to, hey, you just vote for Republican and that's it. We need to be able to articulate the ideas, and Kirk gave us that. Two, the other big thing that Russell Kirk did is that he made a distinction between conservatism and libertarianism. And I personally struggled with this for a long time, especially when I was in college, growing up. I was like, what is the difference between these two? Because libertarians, they talk about freedom all the time, and conservatives talk about freedom all the time. I don't really understand how they're different. It seems like libertarians are people who fight for the ideology and the belief system of freedom, and conservatives just don't do it as well, but they try. They seem like they're watered down libertarians. That was my perspective growing up, and maybe that makes sense to you, because I was like, why shouldn't conservatives then just call themselves libertarianism? If it's always about freedom, then why do we even have two different names for these people? Well, Russell Kirk makes a distinction. As he's going through these different people in history, he brings them together as conservatives, and he also worked with people during the Cold War to be able to try to mesh together different relationships to be able to fight socialism, communism, the Soviets, all of that. He was part of a movement that came together that ultimately got Ronald Reagan in office. So he represented traditional conservatives, and he said, we're not going to be libertarians, but we're going to work with them because we both agree. That to me was helpful to understand, am I a libertarian? Am I conservative? And what's the difference? Russell Kirk answers that question, and he does it by saying that conservatives cherish freedom, but we don't idealize it. And you see that throughout his writing, is that conservatives have respect for freedom. We trust individuals, we trust communities, we trust people to be able to regulate themselves. However, we understand that also takes things like morals, maturity. It takes being able to restrain yourself at times. It essentially takes a population of people who can handle freedom and accomplish that, which in America we have. But if you think about it, there are numerous times, especially overseas, when freedom struggles because the people may not have the backdrop to be able to utilize it fairly, equally, justly. And so while we don't idealize freedom, we respect it, we encourage it, but with a balance towards morality. And that's the difference, because many times you'll see libertarians going to extremes, trying to justify freedom in every possible situation that they can, and it leads them to all kinds of weird places. Conservatives have a more principled view as opposed to ideological. Let's start with freedom as our baseline, as our foundation, and then we're going to navigate based upon who we're talking about. And so when you look at how Russell Kirk puts together the conservative movement and who was or wasn't conservative, he looked at Edmund Burke. And Edmund Burke is famous for saying there is a difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. He supported Americans. He argued in British Parliament during the American Revolution that Britain should not be invading, that should not be fighting Americans, that they should be supporting them as they become their own country. He said that because freedom works here. It should work. We don't need taxation. However, when he was looking at the French Revolution, he said these people are terrifying. Look at their bloodlust. Look at their rage. Look at how they want to kill everybody. If you give them freedom, if you allow them to do this, they will turn into a mob, which is ultimately going to end a dictatorship. And he predicted Napoleon Bonaparte decades before Napoleon even came on the scene. And he said the American way of doing freedom is going to work because they've earned it. They're good people. They have the morale to use it fairly. In France, it's not going to work with the people that they had at the time because they don't have that morality. When you think about the wars that America has fought and how we believed at times that we would be greeted as liberators because we were giving people freedom, what if they don't understand what that means? What if they don't have a worldview or perspective that realizes what has been given? You think about the way that you may navigate with someone who's either been a criminal or is a child or has just made mistakes in their life. You want to give them freedom, but they need to understand what it is and how to use it. If I'm not going to give my 4-year-old daughter keys to my car, I'm not going to let her cook on my stove. I'm not going to do these things because she hasn't reached that age of maturity yet. And so while I support freedom and I love it, I also protect it and I know the value of it. That's the difference between most conservatives and libertarians at heart. Many libertarians will try to apply it in every situation and they're shocked when it goes well in sometimes and it doesn't go well in others. It doesn't mean we can't work together. I have a libertarian on our show every Sunday night. We have an awesome time. I respect him. I love hearing his worldview. And a lot of times he finds himself somewhere in the middle between conservatism and libertarianism. And sometimes I do too. Sometimes I think that we need more libertarians. We need to get back to talking about the budget, how much government is spending, how big it's gotten. We desperately need more libertarians to be able to balance that equation. At the same time, I don't consider myself one because of Russell Kirk and what he's taught me. And so that to me is value added to my daily life because I understand, look, there's more going on than just freedom and government. Sometimes life is just sucky. Sometimes it's just difficult. And it doesn't mean that there are government bureaucrats or centralization. Sometimes that's just the nature of life. Sometimes freedom is the answer. Sometimes the world is more complex than just freedom and authority. I get that from my worldview. I get that from Kirk. And there's some great books that he's got. If you ever want a recommendation, I would be happy to get that for anyone. So get to a couple of comments here. Megan said, good point. Probably to some of the earlier things that we were talking about. Looks like there's a couple others here that I'll get to later on. If you have more questions about this, please let me know. Again, I'd be happy to buy one of these books for you. But this is where I'd like the show to go, is let's dive into conservative philosophy. Let's apply it to our practical lives. And then let's see what some of the other leading thinkers out there are saying, because when you start to put together a coalition of different belief systems, like conservatives, libertarians, and all of that, the way that Russell Kirk did, ultimately the way that Reagan did, it's very formidable and able to stand against leftism, socialism, communism, all these threats that we've had. That's the spirit of conservatism that we need today. We need to be able to get back to understanding who we are, how to work with other peoples, where we may disagree, and then how to overcome those disagreements to work together. So that's what our show is about. Make sure that you are following us on our different platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're going to be expanding to Patreon here pretty soon, as I said. We have a newsletter on our website that you can type in, and then you can message me anytime, and I'll be happy to get back to you. If there's topics that you want to get into, questions that you have, let me know. Have a great Easter. I hope you have a wonderful time with your family or whoever you're hanging out with, that you really enjoy that holiday. We'll see you back here on Wednesday after Easter. So y'all have a great rest of the week, and